After the attack on USJ, the world began to take notice. But for Izuku Midoriya, this was just the beginning. A quirk passed down through blood, a gift once wielded by the strongest hero of America, now combined with the legendary power of One for All. He's not just strong, he's not just smart. He's rewriting the rules of what it means to be a hero. This is where power meets purpose. This is What If Deku Had New Order Part 2. Welcome, Legends, to Chronos Recom. I wrote this story myself, so if you've got an idea for the next part or a brand new What If you want to see, drop it in the comments below. And if you're enjoying the ride, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tap that bell so you never miss an upload. Now, let's jump straight into the story.
Chapter 8, Beyond Limits. 3 days after the USJ incident, Izuku sat cross-legged on the beach where he had once cleared mountains of trash. Dawn painted the horizon in shades of orange and gold, the gentle waves providing a rhythmic soundtrack to his thoughts. His notebook lay open beside him, pages filled with observations and theories. The attack had changed something fundamental in him. The sight of Aizawa-sensei broken and bleeding, the raw power of the Noma creature, the murderous intent of the villains, these weren't abstract concepts anymore. The threat was real, immediate, and evolving. "I need to get stronger," he whispered to himself, staring at his open palm. Faster than I planned. School had been suspended for 3 days to recover from the attack, giving students time to process what had happened. Most were likely resting or seeking comfort with family. Izuku, however, saw opportunity, precious hours to experiment without observation. He stood, brushing sand from his training clothes, and focused inward on the dual energies residing within him. One for All hummed with power, a living current waiting to be channeled. New Order sat alongside it, precise and methodical. Yesterday, he'd pushed One for All to 15% out of desperation. The strain had been significant but not debilitating. Was that his current ceiling? Or could he go further with proper preparation? An idea had been forming since his conversation with All Might, one that seemed obvious in retrospect. Star and Stripe used New Order on herself regularly, he thought, recalling news footage of America's top hero. She gave herself super strength, enhanced durability, even flight. "I've been thinking too conservatively." Heart pounding with anticipation, Izuku touched his own chest. "New Order, my body can withstand 30% of One for All without damage." He felt the rules settle into place, a subtle shift in his physical makeup. Taking a deep breath, he channeled One for All through his system, pushing well beyond his previous limit. The energy surged through him like lightning, red lines appearing beneath his skin as power flooded his muscles. He braced for pain, but it never came. Instead, he felt only the raw potential of One for All at nearly twice his previous capacity. "It works," he breathed, examining his glowing arms with wonder. He launched into motion, sprinting down the beach faster than he'd ever moved before. The world blurred around him as he covered 100 meters in seconds. When he leapt, he soared nearly 15 meters into the air, landing with perfect control. "This changes everything," he thought, exhilaration coursing through him. "But I need to be methodical. Test the limits, document the results." For the next hour, Izuku put himself through rigorous trials, sprinting, jumping, striking, dodging. He carefully recorded each result, noting the dramatic improvements in his physical capabilities. Eventually, he felt the familiar countdown of New Order's time limit approaching for his first rule. As the enhancement faded, he immediately touched his chest again. "New Order, my body heals at accelerated speed." He felt this second rule take effect, a warm sensation spreading through his muscles. The minor fatigue from his exertions began to fade almost immediately. 2 rules active, he confirmed. Now to test the synergy. Channeling 5% of One for All, a level his body could handle naturally, he resumed his training. The combination of accelerated healing and moderate power output allowed him to train continuously without accumulating fatigue. By mid-morning, Izuku had filled several pages with new data and possibilities. The implications were profound. With proper application of New Order, he could potentially use One for All at much higher percentages without the backlash that had limited him before. But there were constraints. New Order's rules had time limits, and maintaining 2 simultaneous rules required constant attention. If he lost focus in battle or was rendered unconscious, the protections would fade, potentially leaving him vulnerable at the worst possible moment. "I need to be strategic," he concluded, making notes. "Save the enhancement rules for critical moments, not rely on them constantly." As the sun climbed higher, Izuku's phone buzzed with a message from All Might. "Meet at Training Ground Gamma, 1 p.m. Bring your notes." "Young Midoriya," All Might called out, his skeletal form somehow still projecting authority as Izuku entered the industrial pipework maze of Training Ground Gamma. I see you've been busy. Izuku nodded, hefting his notebook. I've made some breakthroughs that I wanted to discuss with you. All Might's sunken eyes studied him carefully. You look different. More settled. Somehow. I've been experimenting with applying new order to myself, Izuku explained, unable to keep the excitement from his voice. The results have been promising. For the next half hour, he detailed his morning discoveries, the enhanced tolerance for one for all, the accelerated healing, the potential applications in combat. All Might listened intently, occasionally asking probing questions that helped Izuku refine his thinking. This is impressive analysis, All Might finally said, looking through Izuku's notes. But also concerning. Izuku blinked in surprise. Concerning? How so? All Might closed the notebook, his expression serious. Power without limitation is a dangerous path, young Midoriya. I've seen heroes consumed by the pursuit of strength, forgetting why they sought it in the first place. But I'm not. I know, All Might interrupted gently. Your heart is in the right place. But consider this, what makes a hero truly effective isn't just raw power, but knowing when and how to use it. He pointed to the maze of pipes and platforms surrounding them. That's why I asked you here. I want to test not just your new capabilities, but your judgment in using them. All Might explained the exercise. Izuku would navigate the industrial labyrinth while facing automated obstacles and combat drones. His objective wasn't simply to reach the exit, but to do so while fulfilling various rescue parameters. Think of it as a simulation of real hero work, All Might said. Power is meaningless if civilians get hurt in the process. Izuku nodded, understanding the lesson. I'm ready, then begin. All Might pressed a remote and alarms immediately blared throughout the facility. Izuku activated full cowling at 5%, his comfortable baseline, and leapt onto the nearest pipe. The first challenge appeared almost immediately. A section of catwalk with a simulated civilian dummy teetering on the edge. As Izuku approached, combat drones emerged from hidden compartments, firing stun projectiles toward both him and the civilian. The timing was deliberately tight, designed to force a choice between self-protection and civilian rescue. No choice at all, Izuku thought, touching his chest as he moved. New order. My perception speed increases tenfold for the next 30 seconds. The world seemed to slow around him as his mental processing accelerated dramatically. The incoming projectiles, previously blurs of movement, now appeared to drift through the air like lazy snowflakes. With enhanced perception, Izuku could see the optimal path. He dodged between projectiles, reaching the civilian dummy just as it began to fall. Snatching it securely, he touched the nearest wall. New order. This surface will absorb all kinetic energy from projectiles. The wall shimmered slightly, then began neutralizing the drone attacks as they hit, each projectile simply stopping dead upon impact rather than ricocheting. Izuku placed the civilian in a safe zone and continued deeper into the maze, where more complex scenarios awaited. In each case, he strategically applied new order and one for all in tandem, not simply maximizing power, but finding the precise application needed for each situation. For a collapsing tunnel, he reinforced the structure temporarily while evacuating trapped dummies. For a simulated fire, he converted smoke into harmless vapor while creating safe passages. When combat was unavoidable, he focused on disabling threats with minimal force rather than overwhelming destruction. By the time he reached the exit point, Izuku was breathing hard but satisfied. He'd completed the course efficiently, preserving all civilian dummies while neutralizing threats with surgical precision. All Might was waiting, a timer in his bony hand. 8 minutes, 43 seconds. Impressive. How did I do on the rescue parameters? Izuku asked, wiping sweat from his brow. Perfect score, All Might replied, but his expression remained thoughtful. Your approach was excellent. You prioritized civilian safety over combat, used appropriate force, and thought 3 steps ahead at all times. He powered down the facility and motioned for Izuku to sit beside him on a nearby bench. But I noticed something interesting. You only used new order on yourself once, at the very beginning. Izuku nodded. I realized I didn't need to enhance my physical capabilities for most scenarios. Precise application of my quirks at lower intensity was more efficient. A genuine smile spread across All Might's gaunt face. And that, young Midoriya, is the lesson I was hoping you'd discover on your own. He gestured expansively at the training ground. True heroism isn't about having the most power, it's about using exactly what's needed, when it's needed, for the right reasons. So my idea about enhancing my one-for-all tolerance is a valuable tool for your arsenal, All Might confirmed. But like any powerful technique, it should be reserved for situations that truly demand it. The mark of a great hero isn't how hard they can hit. It's knowing when not to. As they walked back toward the main campus, All Might placed a hand on Izuku's shoulder. The UA Sports Festival is coming up in 2 weeks. It's your chance to show the world what you're capable of. Izuku's eyes widened. I hadn't even thought about that with everything that's happened. It's more important than ever now, All Might said gravely. The USJ attack has shaken public confidence. The sports festival is UA's opportunity to show that the next generation of heroes is ready to rise to the challenge. He fixed Izuku with an intense gaze. This will be your debut on the national stage. The world will be watching, including potential mentors for your upcoming internships. How you present yourself and your abilities will shape your hero career for years to come. The responsibility settled on Izuku's shoulders like a physical weight. I understand. All Might's serious expression softened. I know you do. That's why I'm not worried. He transformed briefly into his hero form, flashing his signature smile. You're going to show them what a hero looks like, young Midoriya. The following 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Classes resumed with heightened security, and the mood among students oscillated between determination and lingering anxiety. The USJ attack had shattered their sense of invulnerability, replacing it with a sobering awareness of what it truly meant to pursue the hero path. Izuku divided his time between regular classes, private training with All Might, and his own experimentation. Each evening, he returned to Dagoba Beach for solitary practice, refining his control over both quirks individually and in combination. He developed a new technique he called Focused Order, channeling one for all's energy through specific pathways to enhance new order's precision and scope. By directing the flow carefully, he could extend new order's effective range or strengthen its impact without increasing the overall strain on his body. The night before the sports festival, Izuku sat at his desk, reviewing his strategy notes one final time. Tomorrow would be his first true public appearance as a hero in training, a chance to declare his presence to the world. His phone buzzed with a text from All Might. Remember what we discussed. Show them who you are, not just what you can do. Izuku smiled, sending a simple reply, I will. Setting his alarm, he climbed into bed and closed his eyes, mind still racing with possibilities. As sleep gradually claimed him, one thought remained clear in his consciousness. Tomorrow, everything changes. Chapter 9, Declaration of War. The roar of 80,000 spectators filled UA's massive stadium as Class 1A prepared to enter the arena. Tension hummed through the waiting area, each student processing the pressure in their own way. Bakugo with barely contained aggression, Todoroki with icy detachment, Ida with rigid formality. Izuku stood quietly, mentally reviewing his objectives. All Might's advice echoed in his mind. Don't just show them your power, show them your heart. You nervous, Deku? Uraraka asked, bouncing slightly on the balls of her feet beside him. He considered the question honestly. Not nervous exactly, more focused. He offered her a reassuring smile. How about you? Terrified? She admitted with a laugh. But excited too. This is our chance to get noticed by pro heroes. It's our chance to show what UA students are made of after the villain attack, Kirishima added, joining their conversation. We gotta prove we're unbreakable. Aizawa appeared at the entrance to the waiting room, his face still partially bandaged from his injuries. It's time. Remember, you're representing not just yourselves but our entire school. Act accordingly. As they filed toward the entrance tunnel, Izuku felt a cold presence at his shoulder. He turned to find Todoroki regarding him with mismatched eyes. Midoriya, Todoroki said quietly, his voice low enough that only Izuku could hear. Objectively speaking, I'm stronger than you. Izuku blinked in surprise at the unexpected declaration. That's direct. All Might has his eye on you, Todoroki continued, gaze unwavering. I don't know why, but I'm going to beat you today. Before Izuku could respond, Present Mix's voice boomed through the stadium. Ladies and gentlemen, the UA Sports Festival is about to begin. Introducing first-year Class 1A. The tunnel flooded with light as they emerged into the arena to thunderous applause. Cameras tracked their movement from every angle, broadcasting their faces to millions of viewers across Japan. This is it, Izuku thought, feeling the weight of countless eyes upon him. My first step onto the true hero stage. Midnight, serving as the chief referee, called for silence as she explained the opening event, a preliminary race around the stadium exterior through a series of obstacles designed to test their abilities. Only the top 42 finishers would advance to the second round. The race begins in 3 minutes, she announced. Prepare yourselves at the starting gate. As they moved toward the starting position, Izuku found himself surrounded by not just Class 1A, but all first-year students from the Hero Course, General Studies, Support, and Business departments, over 200 competitors in total. Sports Festival participants. Present Mix's voice echoed throughout the stadium. Are you ready? The starting gate lit up, a countdown beginning. 3. Izuku settled into a ready stance, channeling 5% of one for all throughout his body. 2. He touched his chest discreetly. New order. My reaction time will be enhanced 5-fold for the next 5 minutes. 1. Here we go. Start. The mass of students surged forward like a tidal wave, immediately creating a bottleneck at the narrow exit tunnel. Izuku's enhanced reaction time allowed him to perceive the chaos in detail, identifying minute gaps in the crowd. Rather than pushing directly forward, he leapt upward, fingers brushing the tunnel ceiling. New order. This section of ceiling will become non-solid to me for 3 seconds. The concrete rippled like water as Izuku passed through it, emerging on top of the tunnel while the other students remained jammed below. Only Todoroki seemed to have found an alternative solution, creating an ice path that propelled him forward, while simultaneously freezing many competitors in place. Smart opening move, Izuku thought, racing along the tunnel roof before dropping back to ground level well ahead of the main pack. Todoroki had established an early lead, with Bakugo close behind, propelling himself with controlled explosions. Izuku accelerated, pushing one for all to 8% as he closed the distance. The first obstacle appeared ahead, a field of enormous robots like those from the entrance exam, including several gigantic zero-pointers. Todoroki engaged without hesitation, freezing a zero-pointer from the ground up before rushing beneath it. Bakugo simply blasted overhead with explosive force. Other students were beginning to catch up, employing various techniques to navigate the mechanical barrier. Izuku assessed his options in a fraction of a second. Going around would take too much time. Going under risked being crushed if the robots collapsed. Going through would require excessive force. Going over it is. As he approached the nearest zero-pointer, Izuku touched the ground at his feet. New order. This piece of earth will launch upward with the force of a catapult when I jump. He channeled 10% of one for all into his legs and leapt. The enhanced jump, combined with the catapult effect, sent him soaring far higher than expected. Up past the zero-pointer's head, arcing over the entire robot field. Would you look at that, folks? Present mixed commentary reached fever pitch. Midoriya from Class 1A just bypassed the entire robot zone with a single jump. What kind of quirk is that? He manipulates physical properties through touch. Aizawa's tired voice replied through the sound system. But that height suggests he's been holding back in class. Izuku landed in a controlled roll beyond the robot field, now neck and neck with Todoroki and Bakugo at the front of the pack. Neither acknowledged him directly, but he could feel their competitive intensity spike at his arrival. The second obstacle stretched before them, the fall, a series of stone pillars separated by abyssal drops connected by tightropes. Todoroki created an ice bridge for himself, sliding across with perfect balance. Bakugo simply blasted over the entire section with explosive propulsion. Both maintained their lead, but Izuku was close behind. Rather than copying either approach, Izuku touched one of the tightropes as he reached it. New order. This rope will become as wide and stable as a balance beam. The thin cable instantly expanded to a comfortable width beneath his feet. With 8% full cowling active, Izuku sprinted across the transformed path with gymnastic precision, maintaining his position in the leading group. Behind them, other students were employing increasingly creative methods to navigate the chasm. Yaoyorozu creating a pole vault, Shiro swinging with tape, Uraraka reducing her weight to float across. The final obstacle came into view, a vast minefield stretching hundreds of meters to the finish line. Landmines dotted the terrain, visible as slightly disturbed patches of earth. They weren't lethal, but would create stunning pink explosions if triggered. Todoroki and Bakugo were forced to slow down, picking their way carefully through the field. This was Izuku's opportunity. He touched the ground at the edge of the minefield. New order. The next 20 mines I step on will not detonate until I'm 5 meters past them. With the safety net in place, Izuku charged directly into the minefield, seemingly reckless to observers. He deliberately stepped on mine after mine, creating a trail of delayed detonations behind him. Midoriya has lost his mind. Present Mike screamed. He's running straight through the minefield. The delayed explosions began to trigger in sequence, creating a cascading wave of pink blasts that propelled Izuku forward while disrupting the path for anyone behind him. Todoroki and Bakugo, sensing their lead vanishing, abandoned caution. Todoroki created ice paths between mines while Bakugo used explosions to hover just above the ground. The three leaders converged, now literally shoulder to shoulder as they raced toward the stadium entrance. One final push, Izuku thought, channeling 15% of one for all, higher than he'd normally risk without protective rules, but manageable for a brief sprint. The surge of power sent him inches ahead of his rivals as they burst through the tunnel and into the stadium's interior. The finish line approached, the three competitors separated by fractions of a second. In the final stretch, Izuku released his hold on one for all, allowing momentum to carry him across the line just before Todoroki, with Bakugo a hair's breadth behind. Izuku Midoriya takes first place, Present Mike announced as the crowd erupted. What an incredible performance from the dark horse contender. Izuku bent forward, hands on his knees, catching his breath as the reality sank in. He'd won not through overwhelming power, but through strategic application of his abilities. Exactly as All Might had advised, Todoroki's heterochromatic gaze bore into him, the challenge in his eyes even clearer than before. Bakugo trembled with barely contained fury, small explosions popping in his palms. "This isn't over, Deku," he growled. Not by a long shot. As other finishers streamed in, Midnight called for attention. The top 42 finishers will advance to the second event. And that event is... She gestured dramatically as the screen behind her randomized through options before settling on a cavalry battle. Midnight explained the rules. Participants would form teams of 2 to 4 people, creating horse and rider formations. Each person had been assigned a point value based on their ranking in the race, with first place, Izuku, worth 10 million points alone. The team that captures Midoriya's headband will be guaranteed advancement regardless of other points, Midnight concluded with a sadistic smile. In other words, everyone will be targeting the first-place winner. All eyes turned to Izuku, gazes ranging from calculated to predatory. Well, he thought wryly, I wanted to make an impression. Teams formed rapidly around him, with top performers like Todoroki and Bakugo quickly securing strong allies. Izuku found himself temporarily isolated, his massive point value making him simultaneously the most valuable and most dangerous partner. Deku. Uraraka approached with determination. Let's team up. He blinked in surprise. You sure? Everyone will be coming after us. That just makes it more exciting, she replied with a grin. Besides, your quirk and mine work well together. We proved that in the battle trial. Her confidence bolstered his own. Thanks, Uraraka. They were joined by Tokoyami, whose dark shadow offered exceptional defense, and Hatsume from the support course, who saw the high-profile position as a perfect showcase for her baby's innovative support items she'd created. As they prepared their formation, Izuku, as the rider, supported by his 3 teammates, he outlined their strategy. We don't need to attack or capture other headbands, he explained. We just need to protect our 10 million points until time expires. With Uraraka reducing our weight, Tokoyami providing mobile defense, and Hatsume support items enhancing our mobility, we can focus on evasion rather than confrontation. The others nodded in agreement, though Hatsume seemed more interested in ensuring her inventions would be visible to the cameras. Cavalry battle begin, Present Mike announced, and chaos immediately erupted across the field. As predicted, nearly every team converged on Izuku's group, creating a surreal scene reminiscent of a zombie horde with a single target. Hold on. Izuku called to his team as he activated full cowling at 5%. With Uraraka's quirk reducing their combined weight, they became incredibly mobile, darting away from the initial rush with surprising speed. Bakugo's team launched an aerial assault almost immediately, his explosions propelling him forward with murderous intent. DKU. Tokoyami's dark shadow intercepted the attack, clashing with Bakugo midair, while Hatsume's jet boosters carried their formation safely away from the confrontation. 9 minutes remaining. Midnight called out. The hunt continues. Todoroki's team approached more methodically, using Ida's speed to position themselves for a frontal assault while Yaoyorozu created capture weapons. Ice spread across the ground toward Izuku's team, limiting their movement options. Time for a counter, Izuku decided, touching his headband discreetly. New order. This headband will teleport back to my hand if it's taken from me for the next 5 minutes. With this insurance in place, he directed his team through increasingly complex evasive patterns, forcing pursuers to exhaust themselves in fruitless chases. When cornered, they would use burst movements, combining Uraraka's zero gravity, Hatsume's boosters, and carefully measured applications of one for all, to escape seemingly impossible situations. Team Midoriya is like a greased eel, Present Mike shouted. No one can hold them down. With 2 minutes remaining, Todoroki tried a new approach. His team herded Izuku's formation toward a corner of the field, where Bakugo's team waited in ambush. The coordinated attack, though unplanned between rivals, created a pincer movement that threatened to trap them completely. "We're surrounded," Tokoyami noted grimly, dark shadow weakening under Todoroki's intense light. Izuku assessed their options rapidly. Uraraka, maximum reduction. Hatsum, all boosters. Tokoyami, prepare dark shadow for upward defense. As their pursuers closed in, Izuku touched the ground beneath them. "New order. This patch of earth will launch upward like a geyser." The ground beneath their formation erupted, propelling them straight upward as Uraraka's quirk minimized their weight to near zero. They soared above the battlefield entirely, momentarily escaping all pursuers. "Now that's what I call thinking outside the box," President Mike screamed. "Team Midoriya has literally left the playing field. What goes up must come down, however, and gravity, even reduced, would eventually bring them back into the fray." As they began their descent, Ida's voice rang out from Todoroki's formation. "Todoroki!" Recipro burst. With blinding speed, Ida's engines propelled his entire team forward at an impossible velocity, far faster than they'd moved throughout the event. The sudden acceleration caught even Izuku by surprise as Todoroki's hand reached up and snatched the 10 million point headband from his forehead. "No!" Izuku gasped, instinctively reaching for the stolen headband. To everyone's astonishment, including Todoroki's, the headband vanished from his grasp, reappearing in Izuku's outstretched hand. What just happened? Present Mick's confusion matched the stunned silence that briefly fell over the stadium. Did Midoriya's headband just teleport? His quirk allows him to impose rules on reality, Aizawa explained, a hint of approval in his usually monotone voice. Apparently, he set a rule that his headband would return if taken. Strategic foresight. Todoroki's expression darkened with frustration as Izuku secured the headband once more. But there was no time for celebration. The cavalry battle was approaching its final minute, and every team was making desperate last attempts to capture the prized 10 million points. In the chaos of the final seconds, Izuku's team managed to maintain possession through a combination of mobility, Dark Shadow's defense, and strategic positioning. When the horn blared to signal the end, they remained in possession of their original headband, a feat that drew thunderous applause from the crowd. Team Midoriya successfully defended the 10 million points, President Mike announced. What an incredible display of teamwork and strategy. As they disbanded their formation, Izuku thanked his teammates sincerely. "We couldn't have done it without each of you. Your quirks and skills were perfect." Uraraka beamed with pride, while Tokoyami acknowledged the compliment with a solemn nod. Hatsum was already scanning the stands, seeking potential investors who might have noticed her babies in action. Across the field, Izuku met Todoroki's intense gaze. The dual-haired boy's challenge had only grown stronger with each encounter, his determination palpable even at a distance. There's something more here than simple competition, Izuku realized. Something personal driving him. After a short break, Midnight announced the 16 students who would advance to the final tournament, a series of one-on-one battles to determine the ultimate champion. Among them were all of Class 1A's standouts: Izuku, Todoroki, Bakugo, Uraraka, Ida, Tokoyami, Yaoyorozu, Kirishima, and others. The matchups were determined by random drawing, with the first round set: Midoriya versus Shinso, Todoroki versus Siro, Ida versus Hatsum, Kaminari versus Shiozaki, Ashido versus Aoyama, Tokoyami versus Yaoyorozu, Bakugo versus Uraraka, Kirishima versus Tetsu. Izuku's opponent, Shinso from General Studies, was unfamiliar to him. As they were dismissed to prepare for the tournament portion, Izuku sought information about the purple-haired student whose quirk remained a mystery. Before he could learn much, he found himself cornered in a hallway by Todoroki. "I need to speak with you," Todoroki said, his tone leaving no room for refusal. Privately, intrigued, Izuku followed him to an isolated corridor away from the main thoroughfare. Todoroki leaned against the wall, heterochromatic eyes fixed on Izuku with unnerving intensity. "You made your headband return to you," he stated flatly. "That wasn't speed or misdirection. It was your quirk." Izuku nodded. "New order allows me to impose rules on reality through touch. I made a rule that the headband would return to me if taken." "Convenient," Todoroki remarked, a hint of bitterness in his voice. "A quirk that can seemingly do anything." "It has limitations," Izuku corrected. "2 rules maximum at any time, limited duration, and I need physical contact to establish them." Todoroki was silent for a moment, considering this information. "Have you ever heard of quirk marriages?" The abrupt change in topic caught Izuku off guard. "Arranged marriages to create children with powerful quirk combinations?" They were common in the early days of quirks before being outlawed for ethical reasons. My father, Endeavor, is the number 2 hero, Todoroki continued, his voice cooling further. He could never surpass All Might through his own power, so he designed a different approach. He found a woman with a powerful ice quirk and essentially bought her from her family through an arranged marriage. Izuku's stomach tightened as he began to understand where this was heading. Their goal was to create a child who inherited both quirks, someone who could finally surpass All Might. Todoroki touched his red hair, then his scar. I am that child. His masterpiece. The raw pain beneath Todoroki's controlled exterior was unmistakable now. My mother, he continued, voice barely above a whisper, couldn't bear to look at my left side. She said it was unsightly, too much like him. Eventually, she broke under his abuse and poured boiling water on my face. Izuku stood speechless, the horror of Todoroki's revelation washing over him in waves. I refuse to use his power, Todoroki declared, frost literally forming on the wall behind him. I'll reject him completely by winning with only my mother's ice. And that's why I need to defeat you, Midoriya, because All Might has clearly taken an interest in you. Izuku processed this information carefully, understanding now the true nature of Todoroki's challenge. This wasn't just about the sports festival, it was a deeply personal rebellion against a lifetime of engineered purpose. Todoroki, he said finally, choosing his words with care. I can't pretend to understand everything you've been through. But I do know this, your quirk is yours, not your father's. Todoroki's eyes narrowed. What? Your power belongs to you? Izuku continued, conviction building in his voice. Refusing to use half of your abilities doesn't hurt Endeavor, it only limits you. And if we face each other in this tournament, he met Todoroki's gaze directly, his own eyes burning with determination. I'll be coming at you with everything I have. You'd be doing yourself a disservice not to do the same. Todoroki stared at him for a long moment, something complex shifting behind his eyes. Without another word, he pushed away from the wall and walked past Izuku, their shoulders nearly brushing. We'll see, was all he said as he disappeared down the corridor. Izuku remained motionless, processing the weight of what he'd just learned. The revelation cast Todoroki's behavior in an entirely new light. His isolation, his cold demeanor, his obsessive determination to prove himself while rejecting half his power. I need to prepare for my first match, he reminded himself, pushing the troubling conversation to the back of his mind. But if Todoroki and I do meet in this tournament, he clenched his fist, feeling one for all's energy humming beneath his skin. I'll show him what it means to embrace your power fully, not for someone else's dream, but for your own. Chapter 10, Limits Shattered. The tournament stage loomed large in the center of the stadium, a simple elevated concrete platform that would soon become the battleground for UA's most promising first years. Cement walls had been erected around the perimeter to protect spectators from the inevitable chaos of quirk-based combat. Izuku stood in the preparation room, reviewing what little information he'd gathered about his opponent, Hitoshi Shinso. The purple-haired general studies student remained largely a mystery, his quirk unregistered in any of the materials Izuku had access to, his performance in the previous events unremarkable. That's suspicious in itself, Izuku noted. How did he qualify for the tournament without showing any notable abilities? A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. It's time, Midoriya, a staff member called. Please proceed to the entrance tunnel. As Izuku walked the long corridor toward the sunlight of the arena, he cleared his mind of distractions. The USJ attack, Todoroki's revelation, All Might's expectations, all faded to background noise as he focused on the immediate challenge. Ladies and gentlemen, present mixed voice boomed across the stadium. Our first match of the finals. From the hero course, it's Izuku Midoriya, the surprise powerhouse who's dominated the competition so far. Izuku emerged into blinding sunlight and deafening cheers, the scale of the audience hitting him anew as he climbed the steps to the platform. Versus. From general studies, Hitoshi Shinso, the dark horse who's clawed his way to the finals through sheer determination. Across the stage, the purple-haired student regarded Izuku with calculating eyes, hands casually in his pockets. Dark circles beneath his eyes gave him a perpetually exhausted appearance, not unlike Aizawa-sensei. So you're the golden boy everyone's talking about, Shinso called out as they faced each other. Must be nice, having a flashy quirk that impresses everyone. Izuku maintained his focus, studying Shinso's body language for clues. The casual provocation seemed deliberate, fishing for a response. Not going to answer? Shinso continued, a small smile playing at his lips. I guess people born with perfect quirks don't need to acknowledge those of us who weren't so lucky. Midnight raised her whip between them. Are both competitors ready? They nodded, eyes locked in mutual assessment. Then begin. Shinso's smile widened. I wonder what it's like, having everything handed to you because of your quirk. People like you make me sick. The blatant attempt to provoke a response confirmed Izuku's suspicion. Shinso's quirk was likely activation-based, triggered by some form of interaction, possibly verbal. Instead of replying, Izuku activated full cowling at 5% and charged forward with explosive speed. Surprise flashed across Shinso's face at the lack of verbal response. He barely managed to sidestep Izuku's initial rush, stumbling backward as he realized his strategy had failed. So you figured it out already? He growled, frustration evident. Someone warned you about my quirk, didn't they? Izuku remained silent, circling his opponent methodically. If Shinso's quirk required verbal interaction, the solution was simple. Don't speak. The challenge would be subduing him without causing injury. Izuku's vastly superior physical capabilities could easily result in serious harm if not carefully controlled. Shinso lunged forward in a surprisingly decent attempt at a grapple, but Izuku easily evaded, using minimal force to redirect the purple-haired student's momentum. Again and again, Shinso attempted to engage physically, growing increasingly frustrated at his inability to trigger his quirk. Fight back properly, Shinso demanded, breathing heavily from exertion. Or are you too afraid to face me without your precious power? The irony of the accusation wasn't lost on Izuku. Shinso was the one desperately trying to use his quirk, while Izuku was deliberately holding back his own abilities. Time to end this, Izuku decided, seeing Shinso's stamina flagging. With one for all enhancing his movement, Izuku appeared behind Shinso in a burst of speed. Before his opponent could react, Izuku placed his palm against Shinso's back. New order. Your feet will be firmly anchored to the ground for the next minute. Shinso suddenly found himself unable to lift his feet as though they'd been cemented to the platform. He struggled uselessly, panic briefly crossing his features as he realized his predicament. What did you do? He demanded, twisting to look over his shoulder. Izuku circled to face him, finally breaking his silence. I imposed a rule on reality that your feet would be anchored to the ground. You can't move from that spot for the next minute. Understanding dawned in Shinso's eyes. So that's your quirk. You can create rules. His shoulders slumped in defeat. I never stood a chance, did I? Midnight approached to confirm Shinso's immobility. Shinso is immobilized and cannot continue. Midoriya advances to the second round. The crowd's reaction was mixed. Appreciation for Izuku's efficient victory tempered by sympathy for Shinso's evident disadvantage. As the rule expired and Shinso regained mobility, Izuku approached him with an extended hand. Your quirk is brainwashing, isn't it? Izuku asked quietly. Activated by getting someone to respond to you verbally. Shinso stared at the offered hand in surprise before reluctantly accepting it. Yeah, not exactly hero material in most people's eyes. Better suited to villainy according to basically everyone. That's ridiculous, Izuku replied firmly. A quirk like yours would be invaluable for hostage situations, riot control, suicide prevention, dozens of scenarios where traditional combat abilities might actually make things worse. Shinso's eyes widened slightly. You actually thought about it that way? Of course. No quirk is inherently heroic or villainous, it's all in how you use it. Izuku's expression grew more serious. The hero course isn't close to you, Shinso. The sports festival is partly designed to identify students with potential for transfer. Make enough of an impression here, and you might get your chance. For a moment, Shinso's perpetual cynicism cracked, revealing genuine hope beneath. I'll keep that in mind. As they parted ways at the exit tunnel, Shinso called back one final comment. Midoriya, that explosive kid and the half-and-half one, they're going to be tougher opponents than me. Don't lose to them, or I'll never forgive you. Izuku nodded, accepting the peculiar vote of confidence for what it was. The tournament continued at a brisk pace. Todoroki defeated Zero with brutal efficiency, freezing him in a massive glacier within seconds. Ida forfeited to Hatsum after unwittingly participating in what amounted to a 10-minute commercial for her support items. Kaminari overwhelmed Shiozaki with his electricity but rendered himself useless in the process. By the time the first round concluded, the quarterfinal matchups were set. Midoriya versus Hatsum, Todoroki versus Ishido, Tokoyami versus Bakugo, Kirishima versus Ida. Izuku's match against Hatsum proved unusual. The support student, having already achieved her goal of showcasing her inventions in the previous round, conceded almost immediately after entering the ring. "I've gotten all the exposure I needed," she declared cheerfully. "No point risking damage to my babies in a fight I can't win." This advancement set up Izuku's semifinal match against Todoroki, who had defeated Ishido with the same ice overwhelming he'd used against Zero, though Ishido's acid had at least partially melted her way free before Midnight called the match. On the other side of the bracket, Bakugo had overcome Tokoyami's dark shadow through the natural advantage his explosive light provided, while Ida's superior speed had eventually worn down Kirishima's hardening. The semifinal matchups now stood: Midoriya versus Todoroki, Bakugo versus Ida. The stadium buzzed with anticipation as the first semifinal approached. Todoroki and Midoriya had established themselves as the tournament's clear standouts, their impending collision promising spectacle worthy of professional heroes. In the preparation room, Izuku calmly reviewed his strategy. Todoroki's ice was formidable, powerful enough to instantly immobilize opponents and cover entire sections of the arena. But it had weaknesses. Overuse caused physical temperature drops in Todoroki himself, and the ice, once formed, could be manipulated or destroyed. "He'll open with a massive ice attack," Izuku predicted. "I need to counter immediately or risk being overwhelmed like Zero." He touched his chest, establishing his first rule: "New order. My body temperature will remain constant regardless of external conditions." This would protect him from the freezing effects of Todoroki's ice, preventing the numbness that might otherwise hamper his movements. For his second rule, he would wait, keeping his options open based on how the battle developed. When the call came, Izuku walked to the arena with measured steps, his mind clear and focused. Across the platform, Todoroki awaited him, mismatched eyes intense with determination. Ladies and gentlemen, present mixed enthusiasm had only grown throughout the day. The first semi-final match pits two of UA's most powerful first years against each other. Todoroki, son of the number 2 hero Endeavor, versus Midoriya, the surprise powerhouse who's dominated every stage so far. They faced each other across the concrete expanse, the air between them charged with tension. "Midoriya," Todoroki said quietly, frost already forming around his right foot. "I will defeat you using only half my power." Izuku met his gaze steadily. "I meant what I said earlier, Todoroki. I'm coming at you with everything I have, and I expect the same from you. Begin." Midnight called, bringing down her whip. Todoroki's opening move was exactly as Izuku had predicted, a massive wave of ice erupting from the ground, surging toward him with overwhelming speed and power. The audience gasped as the glacial formation threatened to engulf the entire platform. But Izuku was ready. Channeling 15% of one for all throughout his body, he touched the ground before him. New order: the ground in a 3-meter radius will convert ice to steam on contact. The approaching ice wall hit the modified section of ground and immediately began to transform, massive clouds of steam billowing upward as the frozen assault evaporated on contact. Izuku charged forward through the steam cloud, using the cover to close distance. Todoroki's eyes widened in surprise as Izuku emerged from the vapor much closer than expected. He hastily generated another ice barrier, but Izuku was prepared for this too. With one for all enhancing his strength, Izuku delivered a devastating punch to the ice formation, not enough to shatter it completely, but sufficient to create a network of cracks throughout its structure. New order: these cracks will expand exponentially for the next 10 seconds. The fractures in the ice immediately began to widen and multiply, the entire barrier collapsing into fragments within moments. Todoroki barely managed to sidestep as Izuku burst through the disintegrating wall. "Incredible," Present Mike shouted. Midoriya is countering Todoroki's ice with some kind of disintegration effect. The audience roared as the two competitors engaged in close quarters, Todoroki continuously generating ice formations while Izuku systematically destroyed them, steadily pushing his opponent toward the boundary. "Why won't you use your left side?" Izuku demanded as they clashed. "You're already slowing down from the cold." It was true. Frost had begun to form on Todoroki's right arm and face, his movements growing perceptibly sluggish as his body temperature dropped from overusing his ice. "I told you," Todoroki replied through gritted teeth, creating a series of ice spikes that Izuku nimbly avoided. "I'll reject him completely by winning without his power." Izuku felt frustration building within him. Todoroki's self-imposed limitation wasn't just holding him back, it was insulting to everyone fighting with their full strength. "Look around you, Todoroki," Izuku called out, gesturing to the stadium as he dodged another ice assault. "Everyone here is giving their absolute best." Uraraka pushed herself to exhaustion against Bakugo. Ida revealed his special move despite wanting to save it. Even Shinso, with a quirk everyone told him wasn't suited for heroism, fought with everything he had. He landed a solid blow on Todoroki's newest ice wall, shattering it completely. And you're standing there with half your power sealed away because of a grudge? That's not rejecting your father, that's letting him control you even now. Something flickered in Todoroki's eyes. Doubt, perhaps, or recognition of an uncomfortable truth. For a brief moment, small flames sputtered to life along his left arm before he forcibly extinguished them. His expression hardening once more. "You don't understand," he growled, generating his largest ice formation yet, a veritable glacier that threatened to push Izuku entirely off the platform. Izuku stood his ground, channeling 20% of One for All, pushing beyond his usual limit, feeling the strain in his muscles. He touched the approaching ice wall directly. "New order. This ice will convert all its mass into kinetic energy directed backward." The entire glacier shimmered, then imploded spectacularly, transforming from solid matter into pure force that blasted back toward its creator. Todoroki was caught completely unprepared, the backlash sending him tumbling across the platform, perilously close to the boundary line. Gasps and cheers erupted from the crowd as Todoroki struggled to his feet, visibly shaking from cold and exertion. Ice crystals had formed across his right side, his breathing labored as hypothermia began to set in. Izuku approached steadily, his expression resolute. "Look at yourself, Todoroki. You're freezing. Your movements are slowing. Your quirk is half fire for a reason. The two halves are meant to balance each other." Todoroki created another ice barrier, but it was noticeably smaller than before, his power flagging as his body temperature continued to drop. "I'm trying to be a hero," Izuku continued, easily breaking through the weakened defense. "And I can't think of anything less heroic than holding back when people are counting on you to give your all." He grabbed Todoroki by the front of his uniform, channeling One for All to enhance his grip. "Your power is yours, not his. Yours." Something broke in Todoroki's expression, a lifetime of resentment cracking under the weight of undeniable truth. Fire erupted from his left side, engulfing his arm and spreading across his torso as years of suppressed power finally found release. "That's it," Izuku encouraged, stepping back as waves of heat melted the accumulated ice and steam filled the arena. "Show me what you're really capable of." The transformation was astonishing. As fire and ice balanced within him, Todoroki stood straighter, his movements regaining fluidity as his body temperature normalized. The power emanating from him was palpable, no longer hampered by artificial constraints. What a turn of events! Present mixed commentary reached fever pitch. Todoroki has ignited his flames for the first time in public competition. This match just reached a whole new level. Across the stadium, Endeavor's triumphant roar could be heard even over the crowd's excitement, a detail that caused a flicker of annoyance to cross Todoroki's features. But for the first time, he didn't allow his father's presence to dictate his actions. "Midoriya," Todoroki called, flames dancing along his left side while ice crystallized on his right. "Thank you. Now I can show you my full power." He slammed his right foot down, creating not just a forward-moving ice wave, but a complete field of glacial spikes that covered the entire platform. Simultaneously, his left side unleashed a massive fire blast that superheated the air above the ice. The thermal contrast created a localized storm effect, steam, wind, and temperature fluctuations generating chaotic conditions across the battleground. It was a technique that would have been impossible without embracing both halves of his quirk. Izuku grinned despite the overwhelming assault. "This is what I wanted to see." With One for All at 20%, he leapt high above the transformed battlefield, touching his own body in midair. "New order. My body will convert excess kinetic energy into explosive force." As he descended toward Todoroki, Izuku channeled One for All into his right arm, pushing to 25% beyond his current safe limit. The pain was immediate, but the new order rule mitigated the worst effects, converting the potential damage into stored energy. "Detroit Smash," he called out, bringing his fist down toward Todoroki's position. Todoroki countered with his ultimate defense, a simultaneous blast of fire and ice that collided directly with Izuku's attack. The resulting impact was catastrophic, a shockwave that shattered the ice field, dissipated the flames, and sent both competitors flying backward. Izuku tumbled across the fractured platform, barely managing to dig his fingers into the concrete to prevent himself from sliding out of bounds. Across the battlefield, Todoroki had created an ice anchor to secure his own position. They faced each other again, both breathing heavily from exertion. The platform between them was utterly destroyed, a wasteland of broken concrete, melting ice, and lingering steam. "I'm not done yet," Todoroki declared, gathering his power for one final attack. "Neither am I," Izuku replied, channeling one for all throughout his entire body at 30%. Far beyond what he would normally attempt without protective rules. Todoroki unleashed his ultimate combination, a spiraling vortex of ice and fire that converged toward Izuku's position with devastating force. The temperature extremes created visible distortions in the air as the attack closed in. Izuku stood his ground, touching the platform beneath him with both hands. New order. This concrete will absorb and neutralize all thermal energy within a 5-meter radius. The approaching elemental maelstrom hit the modified area and simply vanished. Fire and ice alike were consumed. Their energy dissipated harmlessly into the platform. In the sudden silence that followed, Izuku charged forward, one for all propelling him at blinding speed. Before Todoroki could generate another attack, Izuku was upon him. With careful control, he delivered a palm strike to Todoroki's chest, powerful enough to send him sliding backward but not so forceful as to cause injury. Todoroki's heels reached the boundary line, his balance wavering for a critical moment. Izuku touched the ground one final time. New order. The boundary line will extend inward by 10 centimeters. The white line marking the edge of the platform suddenly shifted, now positioned directly behind Todoroki's heels. Midnight's voice cut through the stunned silence. Todoroki is out of bounds. Midoriya advances to the finals. The stadium erupted in thunderous applause, the spectators on their feet as they witnessed the conclusion of what would immediately be hailed as one of the most extraordinary matches in UA Sports Festival history. Izuku approached Todoroki, offering his hand once more. "That was incredible, Todoroki. Your full power is something else entirely." Todoroki stared at the offered hand for a long moment before accepting it. "You could have ended it much earlier. Why push me to use my fire?" "Because I want to be a hero who inspires others to be their best selves," Izuku replied honestly. "And that includes helping a fellow hero recognize his own true strength." A small, genuine smile, perhaps the first Izuku had ever seen from him, briefly crossed Todoroki's face. "I have a lot to think about. But thank you, Midoriya." As medical robots approached to treat their minor injuries, Izuku glanced toward the stands where All Might sat in his civilian form. Their eyes met briefly, the skeletal man offering a subtle thumbs-up of approval. One more match, Izuku thought, determination coursing through him. One more step toward showing the world who I am. The second semi-final between Bakugo and Ida ended with Bakugo's victory, Ida's speed proving insufficient against Bakugo's raw explosive power and combat instincts. The stage was now set for the final confrontation. Midoriya versus Bakugo, a matchup laden with personal history and explosive potential. As Izuku prepared for the championship match, he couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought him here. From the lonely child scribbling quirk analyses in his notebook to standing on the cusp of becoming the UA Sports Festival champion, it was a transformation even he sometimes struggled to fully comprehend. But this isn't just about winning, he reminded himself. It's about declaring my presence to the world, showing them what kind of hero I intend to become. With that thought firmly in mind, Izuku Midoriya stepped into the tunnel once more, ready to face his oldest rival on the greatest stage their young careers had yet known. Chapter 11. Champion's Declaration. The stadium had reached a fever pitch of excitement by the time Izuku and Katsuki took their positions for the final match. The day's events had built to this climactic confrontation. Two of Class 1A's most powerful students, their contrasting styles and personalities promising a spectacle worthy of professional heroes. "Ladies and gentlemen," present mixed voice somehow found even greater enthusiasm. "The moment you've all been waiting for. The championship match of the UA Sports Festival first-year tournament." The crowd roared in response, the energy palpable even from the isolated platform where the competitors stood. In this corner, the explosive powerhouse with unmatched combat instincts, Katsuki Bakugo. Bakugo stood with aggressive confidence, small detonations popping in his palms as he glared across the platform. And his opponent, the strategic mastermind who's dominated every stage with incredible versatility, Izuku Midoriya. Izuku settled into a ready stance, his expression calm and focused despite the magnitude of the moment. Their eyes locked across the concrete expanse, years of shared history adding layers of meaning to the confrontation. This wasn't just a tournament final, it was the culmination of a rivalry that had defined much of their young lives. "I've been waiting for this, Deku," Bakugo called out, his voice carrying clearly despite the crowd's excitement. "No more running. No more tricks. Just you and me going all out." "I wouldn't have it any other way, Kakin," Izuku replied steadily. Midnight raised her whip between them. "This is the championship match. Plus Ultra Spirit is expected from both of you. Are you ready?" They nodded in unison, neither breaking eye contact. "Then begin." Bakugo launched forward immediately, propelled by explosive force with his right arm cocked back for his signature opening move. Still leading with the right, Izuku noted, activating full cowling at 15%. Rather than dodging, Izuku met the charge directly, shifting his weight at the last possible moment to redirect Bakugo's momentum. The explosive punch missed by millimeters as Izuku countered with a swift palm strike to Bakugo's solar plexus. Gah! Bakugo grunted, stumbling backward from the impact. That's new, Deku. You usually run first. I told you before, Izuku replied, maintaining his stance. I'm not running anymore. Bakugo's grin turned feral. Good. Now I can crush you at your best. He unleashed a barrage of explosions, using them not just as attacks but as cover to maneuver unpredictably around Izuku. It was a strategy that had overwhelmed many opponents, the combination of blinding flashes, concussive force, and smoke creating disorienting conditions while Bakugo attacked from constantly shifting angles. But Izuku had studied this approach for years. Channeling One for All to enhance his senses and reaction time, he tracked Bakugo's movements through the chaos, blocking or evading each strike with controlled precision. Stop running and fight me properly, Bakugo roared, frustration building as his attacks failed to land effectively. I'm right here, Kakin, Izuku replied calmly, countering with a sweep that nearly took Bakugo's legs from under him. You're the one bouncing around. The exchange continued at blistering speed, Bakugo's raw aggression and explosive power against Izuku's calculated movements and enhanced capabilities. Neither could gain a decisive advantage, their intimate knowledge of each other's fighting styles creating a stalemate of offensive and defensive maneuvers. After a particularly intense exchange, they separated briefly, both breathing heavily. Bakugo's costume showed signs of damage from the repeated impacts, while Izuku had minor burns on his arms from close proximity explosions. You've been hiding your true strength all along, haven't you? Bakugo demanded, eyes narrowing. That's not just your new order quirk. There's something else. Izuku didn't confirm or deny, but Bakugo had always been perceptive beneath his brash exterior. He'd noticed the physical enhancements that couldn't be explained by new order alone. It doesn't matter, Bakugo continued, adjusting his gauntlets. Whatever power you've got, I'll still beat you. He pulled his right arm back, a distinctive clicking sound emanating from his gauntlet as he prepared his most devastating attack, the stored sweat explosion he'd attempted in their battle training. I've been saving this for you, Deku, he shouted, taking aim. AP shot, the concentrated explosion blasted forward like a cannon, more focused and penetrating than Bakugo's usual attacks. Izuku barely had time to react, touching the air before him. New order. The air in this path will become dense as steel. The explosive force hit the modified air and dispersed outward in a spectacular display, unable to penetrate the temporarily solidified atmosphere. The audience gasped at the defensive display while Bakugo's eyes widened in surprise. You're not the only one who's been developing new techniques, Izuku called out, already moving to capitalize on the opening. With One for All at 20%, he closed the distance in a blur of movement, launching a series of strikes that forced Bakugo into a defensive posture. Each impact was carefully measured, powerful enough to test Bakugo's limits without causing serious injury. Bakugo refused to yield ground, countering with explosive enhanced movements that matched Izuku's speed. The concrete beneath them began to crack from the force of their exchange, debris flying as their clash intensified. This is incredible. Present mixed commentary barely registered through the focus of combat. The skill level these first years are displaying is beyond anything we've seen before. Bakugo managed to create separation with a 360-degree explosion, buying himself space to recover. His breathing was labored, but his eyes burned with undiminished determination. Time to end this, Deku, he declared, positioning his hands behind him. Howitzer impact. He began spinning rapidly, using controlled explosions to build rotational momentum while creating a vortex of superheated air. It was his ultimate technique, one that combined raw power with the amplifying effects of cyclonic pressure. Izuku recognized the danger immediately. Bakugo was committing fully to this attack, channeling everything into a single devastating strike. Countering or evading wouldn't be enough, he needed to match the technique with equivalent force. Touching his right arm, Izuku established his first rule, New Order. My arm can withstand 100% of One for All without damage. Then, as Bakugo continued building momentum, Izuku touched the platform beneath him. New Order. This concrete will convert force applied to it into supporting energy for my body. With both rules in place, Izuku channeled One for All into his protected arm, pushing all the way to 100% for the first time. Red energy lines burned beneath his skin as unprecedented power flooded his system. Howitzer impact. Bakugo roared, launching forward in a spiraling explosive assault that resembled a human missile more than a conventional attack. Izuku planted his feet firmly on the modified concrete, drawing strength from the platform itself as he cocked back his empowered arm. Detroit Smash. The two techniques collided with cataclysmic force, Bakugo's explosive spiral meeting Izuku's 100% punch in a blinding flash of energy. The shockwave rippled outward, shattering the concrete platform and sending debris flying against the protective barriers. Wind pressure whipped through the stadium with such intensity that spectators in the front rows had to brace themselves against their seats. For a moment, the outcome hung in perfect balance, two immense forces canceling each other in spectacular equilibrium. Then, gradually, Izuku's attack began to overpower Bakugo's. The combination of one for all at full power, enhanced by the platform's converted energy, provided a margin of superiority that even Bakugo's perfect execution couldn't match. The explosive spiral collapsed, and Bakugo was sent flying backward, tumbling across the shattered remains of the platform before coming to rest perilously close to the boundary. Through sheer force of will, he pushed himself to his knees, refusing to acknowledge defeat despite the obvious outcome of the exchange. Izuku approached steadily, his enhanced arm still crackling with residual energy, but completely undamaged thanks to New Order's protection. The difference in their conditions was stark, Bakugo barely able to stand, while Izuku appeared largely unaffected by the titanic clash. "It's over, Kaken," Izuku said quietly, standing before his childhood friend. "Like hell it is," Bakugo growled, struggling to his feet. "I can still fight." He raised his trembling hands, small explosions popping weakly in his palms as he assumed a defiant stance. But it was clear to everyone watching that he had reached his limit, his body pushed beyond reasonable endurance by the final exchange. Izuku met his gaze directly, seeing past the anger to the pride and frustration beneath. "You fought incredibly, Kaken, but this match is mine." With deliberate gentleness, he placed his hand on Bakugo's shoulder and applied just enough pressure to tip his exhausted rival backward over the boundary line. "Bakugo is out of bounds," Midnight declared, raising her whip. "Midoriya is the champion." The stadium erupted in thunderous applause, the spectators on their feet in recognition of the extraordinary battle they had witnessed. Camera flashes illuminated the platform as media captured the historic moment, UA's newest champion standing amid the devastation of the final clash. Bakugo remained seated just beyond the boundary, head bowed as the reality of defeat washed over him. When Izuku approached and offered his hand, Bakugo initially stared at it with conflicted emotions warring across his features. "This doesn't change anything," he finally said, ignoring the offered assistance and pushing himself to his feet. "I'll still become the #1 hero." "I know you will," Izuku replied sincerely. "And I'll be right there beside you, pushing each other to be better." Something shifted in Bakugo's expression, not quite acceptance, but perhaps the first acknowledgement that their rivalry had evolved into something more complex than simple antagonism. "Just don't get comfortable, Deku," he said, turning away. "This is only the beginning." As medical robots approached to assess their conditions, Izuku looked around the stadium, taking in the scale of what had just transpired. His gaze found All Might in the stands, the skeletal man offering a subtle nod of approval that meant more than any public accolade. "I did it," Izuku thought, a mix of pride and humility washing over him. "I showed them who I am, not just my power, but my heart." The awards ceremony was appropriately grand, a tiered podium rising from the repaired arena floor as fireworks illuminated the evening sky. Todoroki and Bakugo stood on the second and third places respectively, while Izuku occupied the champion's position at the top. All Might himself presented the medals, his larger-than-life presence adding gravitas to the proceedings. When he reached Todoroki, he spoke quietly enough that only those on the podium could hear. "Young Todoroki, you showed tremendous growth today, not just in power, but in understanding yourself. That is the mark of a true hero." Todoroki accepted the bronze medal with a solemn nod, his expression thoughtful rather than disappointed. Moving to Bakugo, All Might faced a characteristic challenge. The explosive student had to be physically restrained to participate in the ceremony at all, his silver medal accepted with visible resentment. "Young Bakugo," All Might said, unperturbed by the display, "your fighting spirit is unmatched. Channel that determination properly and there will be no limit to your growth." Finally, he stood before Izuku, gold medal in hand. Their eyes met in a moment of shared understanding, mentor and successor, united in purpose beyond what the watching world could comprehend. "Young Midoriya," All Might declared for all to hear, "you have shown exceptional skill, strategy, and most importantly, heart. This victory is well earned." As the medal was placed around his neck, Izuku felt the weight of its significance. Not just as recognition of his performance, but as a symbol of the path he had chosen and the responsibility he had accepted. All Might leaned closer, whispering words meant only for Izuku. "I couldn't be prouder of how you handled yourself today. You're well on your way to becoming the hero I always knew you could be." The ceremony concluded with All Might leading the entire stadium in a thunderous cheer of plus ultra that seemed to shake the very foundations of UA. Later, as Izuku changed back into his school uniform, his phone buzzed with notifications. Classmates congratulating him, family expressing pride, and news alerts already analyzing his performance from every angle. The attention was overwhelming but affirming, confirmation that his declaration to the world had been received. Amidst the digital noise, one message stood out. A simple text from his mother. "I always believed in you, Izuku. Your father called from overseas. He saw everything and couldn't stop crying. We're so proud." Tears welled in Izuku's eyes as he read the message, the emotional weight of the day finally catching up to him. For all the public acclaim and professional recognition, this simple expression of parental pride touched something deeper. As he left the stadium that evening, Izuku was intercepted by a familiar figure waiting in a secluded corridor, All Might in his true form, leaning against the wall with uncharacteristic weariness. "Young Midoriya," he greeted with a tired smile. "A moment before you go?" "Of course," Izuku replied, immediately concerned by his mentor's appearance. "Are you all right? You seem exhausted." All Might waved off the concern. "Just pushed myself a bit today with all the ceremonies. But that's not why I wanted to speak with you." His sunken eyes grew serious. "That final exchange with young Bakugo, you used one for all at 100%, didn't you?" Izuku nodded. "With new order protecting my arm from damage. It was the only way to counter his ultimate technique. And that's precisely what concerns me," All Might said, placing a bony hand on Izuku's shoulder. "The synergy between your quirks is even more powerful than I anticipated. Using new order to negate one for all's physical limitations, it's unprecedented. Isn't that a good thing?" Izuku asked, confused by his mentor's tone. "Power without limitation is a dangerous path," All Might replied, echoing his earlier warning. "I've seen how quickly strength can become an end unto itself, rather than a means to help others." Understanding dawned in Izuku's expression. "You're worried I'll become dependent on maximum output, using 100% for every challenge instead of developing proper control." "Precisely. The greatest heroes aren't those with the most power, but those who know exactly how much force each situation requires." All Might's grip tightened slightly. "Promise me you'll continue developing your control over lower percentages, even as new order gives you access to the upper limits." "I promise," Izuku replied sincerely. "Today was exceptional circumstances. I know that relying on full power for every challenge would be both reckless and unnecessary." All Might's expression softened with relief. "Good. Now, there's something else we need to discuss, your internship." Following the sports festival, Izuku explained, second and third year students would participate in workplace training with established agencies. First years, however, would undertake week-long internships with pro heroes who had expressed interest in their potential. "After your performance today, you'll have no shortage of offers," All Might predicted. "But choose carefully. This isn't just about gaining experience. It's about finding a mentor whose approach aligns with your goals." Izuku nodded thoughtfully. "Any recommendations?" "Several, actually. Gran Torino, my own former teacher, has expressed interest in meeting you. Edshot's precision-based combat style might complement your analytical approach. Mirko's physical training regimen would help develop your baseline capabilities without quirk enhancement." "And you?" Izuku asked hesitantly. "Would interning under you be an option?" All Might shook his head regretfully. "Much as I'd like that, it would raise too many questions about our connection. One for All must remain secret, especially as the League of Villains remains active. Your internship should be with someone who can help you grow in ways I cannot." As they parted ways, Izuku felt a peculiar mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. The sports festival had been everything he'd hoped for, a chance to demonstrate his capabilities, to push his limits, and to declare his presence to the hero community. What came next would be equally important. Applying those abilities in real-world hero work, learning from established professionals, and continuing to develop the unique potential of his dual quirks. One step closer, he thought, gazing up at the star-filled sky as he headed home. One step closer to becoming the greatest hero. Chapter 12. Stain's Acknowledgement. The week following the sports festival passed in a blur of media attention and academic focus. Class 1A returned to their regular curriculum, though now with a notable difference. They were minor celebrities, their performances analyzed on hero forums, and their future trajectories speculated about by industry experts. Izuku found the attention simultaneously flattering and discomfiting. His decisive victory in the tournament had catapulted him to the forefront of public interest, with hero blogs dissecting his quirks applications and sports commentators praising his strategic approach to combat. "Dude, you're trending again," Kaminari announced during lunch, holding up his phone to show a social media feed dominated by clips from the final match. "They're calling you the Regulator," Kirishima added with an approving grin, "because of how your quirk imposes rules on reality." "Pretty manly nickname." Izuku smiled awkwardly, still unaccustomed to being the center of attention. "I'm just focused on the internships for now." Did everyone decide where they're going? The conversation shifted to their upcoming placements. Each student had received offers from heroes who had witnessed their performances at the festival, with the top performers receiving dozens of invitations. "I got 322 offers," Todoroki stated matter-of-factly when asked, though his usual coldness had softened somewhat since the tournament. "I've decided to intern with my father's agency." This announcement drew surprised looks from his classmates, given what many had inferred about his complicated relationship with Endeavor. "You sure about that?" Kirishima asked hesitantly. Todoroki nodded, his mismatched eyes reflecting new resolve. "I need to understand him better if I'm going to forge my own path. Besides, he's still the number 2 hero for a reason." Bakugo, who had received slightly fewer offers than Todoroki despite placing second, had chosen the Genist hero, Best Genist's agency. A decision that surprised many given the stylish hero's seemingly incompatible personality with Bakugo's own. "What about you, Midoriya?" Uraraka asked. "You must have gotten the most offers after winning." 407, Izuku confirmed, still somewhat dazed by the number, including several from the top 10. "Whoa," Kaminari exclaimed. "So which one did you pick? Endeavor? Hawks? Ed shot." Izuku shook his head. "Actually, I chose Gran Torino. He's a retired hero who reached out specifically after seeing my performance." This response was met with blank stares. "Gran? Who?" Ishido asked, voicing the collective confusion. "He's not well known publicly," Izuku explained, omitting the connection to All Might. "But his combat expertise and experience with quirk development align with what I'm looking for right now." In truth, All Might's recommendation had heavily influenced his decision. The opportunity to learn from the hero who had trained the symbol of peace himself was too valuable to pass up, even if it meant declining more prestigious offers. Later that afternoon, Aizawa distributed their official internship assignments along with special permission forms for costume use during their placements. "Remember," he said in his usual monotone, "you'll be representing UA while working with these heroes. Act accordingly, listen to your mentors, and try not to get killed." The casual addition of potential mortality did nothing to dampen the class's excitement. For many, this would be their first taste of real hero work beyond the controlled environment of UA's training facilities. As they filed out after class, Izuku found Ida unusually quiet, his normally expressive hand gestures and precise movements subdued to near stillness. "Everything okay, Ida?" Izuku asked, falling into step beside him. Ida adjusted his glasses mechanically, his expression carefully neutral. "Yes. Thank you for your concern." The clipped response was so uncharacteristic that Izuku stopped walking entirely. "Ida, what's wrong? You've been different since yesterday." For a moment, it seemed Ida would maintain his facade of normalcy. Then, with a deep breath, he removed his glasses and pinched the bridge of his nose, a gesture of vulnerability rarely seen from the usually composed class representative. "My brother was attacked by the hero killer while on patrol in Hosu City," he said quietly, voice strained with suppressed emotion. "He survived, but his injuries were severe. The doctors don't know if he'll ever walk again, let alone continue as a hero." Izuku's heart sank at the revelation. Ingenium, Ida's older brother and a renowned pro hero, had been a significant influence on Ida's own hero aspirations. "Ida, I'm so sorry," he said, placing a hand on his friend's shoulder. "Is that why you chose to intern in Hosu City?" Ida's eyes widened slightly in surprise. "How did you know?" "I saw the assignment sheet," Izuku admitted. "Your placement is with Manuel, who operates primarily in Hosu." It seemed notable given the circumstances. A tense silence stretched between them, Ida's internal conflict visible in his rigid posture. "Whatever you're thinking about doing," Izuku said carefully, "remember that we're still students. If you're going to Hosu to find the hero killer." "I've chosen Manuel's agency because of his emphasis on traditional heroics," Ida interrupted, his voice regaining its formal cadence. "Nothing more." Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to prepare for tomorrow's departure. He walked away with measured steps, leaving Izuku standing in the hallway with unresolved concern. The explanation was perfectly reasonable, but the flash of cold determination in Ida's eyes told a different story. I should talk to Uraraka about this, Izuku thought. Ida might be planning something dangerous. The following morning found Izuku standing before a dilapidated apartment building in one of Tokyo's older districts, double-checking the address on his internship papers. The modest structure seemed an unlikely base for a hero who had once trained All Might himself. "This can't be right," he muttered, examining the worn buzzers beside the entrance. Finding Torino among the labels, he pressed it hesitantly. No response came. After a second attempt yielded similar results, Izuku tried the door. Finding it unlocked, he cautiously entered and made his way to the apartment number listed in his documentation. "Hello?" he called, knocking on the door. "Gran Torino, sir? It's Izuku Midoriya from UA." When no answer came, he carefully pushed the door open and froze at the sight that greeted him. An elderly man in a hero costume lay face down on the floor, surrounded by what appeared to be blood. "Sir!" Izuku rushed forward, heart pounding with alarm. Had the hero killer struck again? Or perhaps the League of Villains, targeting All Might's former teacher? As he reached the prone figure, however, the blood revealed itself as nothing more alarming than spilled red sauce from a half-eaten sausage pastry. The elderly man groaned, then suddenly sprang upward with surprising agility, landing neatly on his feet. "Gotcha," he cackled, pointing a gnarled finger at Izuku's startled face. Nothing like a good prank to test a youngster's reactions. Izuku blinked in confusion. "You're Gran Torino." The diminutive figure barely reached Izuku's waist, his white and yellow costume reminiscent of an earlier era of heroics. Despite his advanced age, evidenced by deep wrinkles and thinning white hair, his eyes were sharp and assessing as they studied Izuku from head to toe. "Expecting someone more impressive, were you?" Gran Torino asked, his voice shifting from senile playfulness to shrewd calculation in an instant. "Tashinori sent you here because you need someone who understands what you're carrying." The casual reference to All Might's civilian name confirmed this was indeed the legendary hero who had helped shape the symbol of peace. "Yes, sir," Izuku replied, straightening his posture respectfully. "I'm honored by the opportunity to learn from you." Gran Torino snorted dismissively. "Save the formalities, boy. I watched your performance at the sports festival. Impressive control over New Order, but your handling of One for All is still amateurish at best." He pointed to Izuku's costume case. "Get changed. I want to see what you can do firsthand." Within minutes, Izuku stood in full hero costume in the center of Gran Torino's modest apartment, the furniture pushed aside to create a small training area. The elderly hero circled him with critical eyes, occasionally poking at Izuku's arms or legs, as if testing their consistency. "Tashinori tells me you can use up to 20% of One for All consistently," Gran Torino said, "with higher percentages possible through New Order's protection. Show me your full cowling at 20%. Izuku nodded, channeling One for All throughout his body. Red energy lines appeared beneath his skin as power coursed through his system at the specified level. Gran Torino mused, circling him again. "The distribution is decent, but your pathways are inefficient. You're wasting energy with poor circulation." Before Izuku could respond, the elderly hero suddenly vanished from view. A split second later, a powerful impact struck Izuku from behind, sending him stumbling forward. "Too slow," Gran Torino called, already rebounding off a wall to deliver another strike from a different angle. Izuku tried to track the movement, but Gran Torino's jet quirk allowed him to change direction mid-air with such speed that he appeared as little more than a yellow blur. Impact after impact struck from unpredictable vectors, each accompanied by critical commentary. "Your reaction time is lacking. Your defensive stance is full of openings. You rely too much on power and not enough on technique." After several minutes of this one-sided exchange, Izuku realized the pattern behind Gran Torino's movements. The elderly hero was using the walls, ceiling, and floor as launching points, maintaining constant momentum while changing trajectories to confuse opponents. "I need to predict his path," Izuku thought, enhancing his perception with 25% of One for All focused in his sensory systems. As Gran Torino rebounded off the ceiling, Izuku touched the floor where he calculated the hero would land next. "New Order. This floor section will become as soft as a mattress." Gran Torino hit the modified surface and immediately sank into it, his carefully planned trajectory disrupted as his feet became temporarily entrapped in the cushion-like floor. "Ha!" the elderly hero barked, sounding more pleased than frustrated. Using your environment to counter speed. Not bad. He extracted himself with surprising strength, brushing off his costume as the floor returned to normal. But you're still thinking too conventionally. One for all and new order together should allow for movement patterns that defy normal physics. Izuku frowned thoughtfully. What do you mean? Your quirks complement each other perfectly, Gran Torino explained, retrieving a pastry from a nearby counter and biting into it casually. One for all provides raw power and speed, while New Order offers precision and environmental control. Together, they should make you nearly untouchable in mobility. He pointed to the window. For instance, instead of just running faster with One for All, you could use New Order to create stepping stones in midair, allowing for three-dimensional movement patterns that even I couldn't predict. Izuku's eyes widened as possibilities unfolded in his mind. Or modify air resistance around my body to eliminate drag while using One for All speed. Exactly. Gran Torino nodded approvingly. Now you're thinking creatively. One for All users have always been about raw power, but you have the unique opportunity to refine that approach with strategic precision. For the remainder of the day, they explored these concepts through practical exercises, Gran Torino attacking relentlessly while Izuku developed new applications of his combined quirks in real time. By evening, the apartment showed signs of their intense training, scuff marks on the walls, furniture in disarray, and both participants breathing heavily from exertion. Not bad for a first day, Gran Torino conceded, lowering himself into a chair with a slight wince. You adapt quickly. Tomorrow we'll take this outside, this old place can't handle much more punishment. As Izuku helped restore the apartment to order, the elderly hero's expression grew more serious. Tashinori tells me you're aware of All for One. Izuku nodded soberly. All Might's nemesis, the one who gave him his injury, the one who's been stealing and distributing quirks for generations. Gran Torino corrected, his voice hardening. The true evil behind the League of Villains and countless other atrocities throughout Hero Society's history. He fixed Izuku with an intense gaze. The combination of your quirks represents something uniquely threatening to him. New Order's ability to impose rules on reality, amplified by One for All's raw power. It's perhaps the most effective counter to All for One's stolen abilities that has ever existed. The implications settled heavily on Izuku's shoulders. You think he'll target me specifically? Eventually, yes, Gran Torino confirmed bluntly. Which is why you need to master both quirks as quickly as possible. The training I'm giving you isn't just about becoming a better hero, it's about preparing you for a confrontation that might determine the future of our society. The following days established a grueling but productive routine. Mornings were devoted to physical training, Gran Torino pushing Izuku to improve his baseline capabilities without quirk enhancement. Afternoons focused on quirk application in various scenarios with emphasis on efficiency rather than raw output. You're still wasting movement, Gran Torino critiqued during their fourth day, observing Izuku navigate an improvised obstacle course in a nearby abandoned lot. One for All enhances everything, not just strength and speed, but also coordination and kinesthetic awareness. You should never make an unnecessary motion. By the fifth day, Izuku had developed several new techniques combining his quirks in innovative ways. Air Step allowed him to create temporary solid platforms in mid-air, enabling three-dimensional movement patterns that were nearly impossible to predict. Flow State used New Order to optimize his body's energy circulation, improving his effective output of One for All without increasing the percentage. On the morning of the sixth day, their training was interrupted by an emergency alert on Gran Torino's hero communicator, a major villain incident unfolding in Hosa City with multiple heroes requesting backup. Nomu, Gran Torino muttered, studying the details with narrowed eyes. The same type of engineered villain from the USJ incident. Izuku's thoughts immediately went to Ida. My classmate is interning in Hosu. Then he's in the thick of it, Gran Torino replied grimly. This looks coordinated, multiple artificial humans attacking different parts of the city simultaneously. He reached for his costume boots, expression resolute. This qualifies as an all-hands situation. As your supervising hero, I'm authorizing your participation in a response capacity only. You stay behind me at all times and focus on civilian evacuation. Understood. Yes, sir, Izuku replied, already preparing his equipment with practiced efficiency. 20 minutes later, they were aboard a bullet train bound for Hosu, the journey accelerated by emergency priority clearance. Through the windows, they could see smoke rising from several locations in the city ahead, evidence of the destruction already underway. Remember your parameters, Gran Torino instructed as they approached the station. Evacuation only. Leave combat to the pros unless absolutely necessary for self-defense. As the train slowed for its approach to Hosa Station, something massive suddenly crashed through the side of the car, a hulking figure with exposed brain matter and grotesquely enhanced musculature. Nomu. Izuku gasped, recognizing the creature as similar to the one from USJ, though smaller and less developed. Gran Torino reacted instantly, his jet quirk propelling him into the creature with devastating force. Get the civilians to safety, he commanded, driving the Noma back through the breach it had created. Izuku turned to the terrified passengers, activating full cowling at 15%. Everyone moved to the forward cars. This one isn't safe. As he helped evacuate the damaged car, ensuring no one was left behind, Izuku caught a glimpse of something through the ruptured wall. A familiar figure in an alleyway below, confronting a man with blades and a distinctive red scarf. Ida, Izuku realized with alarm. And that must be the hero killer. His classmate appeared to be partially paralyzed, his armor damaged, and a sword impaled through his shoulder. The hero killer, Stain, stood over him with predatory intent, another pro-hero lying immobile nearby. Without hesitation, Izuku leapt through the breach, channeling 20% of one for all to control his descent to the alley below. As he landed between Stain and Ida, the villain's bloodshot eyes narrowed with interest. Another child playing hero? Stain remarked, his raspy voice sending chills down Izuku's spine. Or perhaps something more? Midoriya? Ida gasped from his partially paralyzed position. What are you doing here? Run. This doesn't concern you. It absolutely concerns me, Izuku replied steadily, never taking his eyes off Stain. You're my friend, Ida. I'm not leaving you to die. Stain tilted his head, studying Izuku with disturbing intensity. Interesting. You have the eyes of a true hero, unlike this revenge-seeking fake. He gestured dismissively toward Ida. He knows my brother's name, Ida said through gritted teeth. He remembers everyone he's purged. This is my fight, Midoriya. This stopped being just your fight when you put yourself in mortal danger, Izuku countered, assessing their situation rapidly. The alley was narrow, limiting movement options. Stain had at least 3 visible blades and likely more concealed. Based on Ida's paralysis and the reports Izuku had studied, the hero killer's quirk probably involved immobilization through blood consumption, explaining his blade-focused fighting style. New order. The ground beneath us will absorb and neutralize all blood it contacts. The subtle rule would prevent Stain from using any spilled blood to activate his quirk, at least from droplets that reached the ground. It wasn't a complete counter, but it would limit his options. I've sent my location to other heroes, Izuku declared, though this was a calculated bluff. More are on the way. Release Native and Ida, and surrender peacefully. Stain's lipless mouth curled into something resembling a smile. You think like a hero, speak like a hero, and move like a hero. Perhaps you're worthy of that title, unlike so many fakes polluting this profession. Without warning, he launched forward with inhuman speed, blades slashing in patterns designed to draw blood rather than kill immediately. Izuku activated full cowling at 25%, pushing his reaction time to match Stain's velocity. The first exchange was a blur of movement, Stain's expert blade work against Izuku's enhanced agility. Metal whispered past fabric as Izuku narrowly avoided being cut, while his counters found only empty air as the hero killer twisted with snake-like flexibility. You're fast, Stain acknowledged, landing in a crouch several meters away. And observant. You've already figured out my quirk, haven't you? Blood curdle, Izuku confirmed, maintaining his defensive position between Stain and the immobilized heroes. You ingest someone's blood to paralyze them. The duration probably varies based on blood type. Stain's eyes widened slightly. Impressive analysis. But knowing my ability doesn't make you immune to it. He charged again, this time with throwing knives preceding his advance. Izuku dodged most, but one grazed his cheek, drawing a thin line of blood. Stain's tongue extended unnaturally, seeking the crimson droplet as it fell. New order. My blood will evaporate upon leaving my body. The droplet vanished into vapor before Stain's tongue could reach it, the villain's eyes widening in surprise at the unexpected defense. Using this momentary confusion, Izuku launched a counterattack, channeling One for All into a devastating palm strike aimed at Stain's solar plexus. The hero killer twisted at the last moment, taking a glancing blow that still sent him skidding backward. His expression had shifted from predatory interest to genuine caution. Another quirk? He hissed, reassessing Izuku entirely. Or part of the same one. Midoriya, Ida called, his voice strained with emotion and pain. Please stop. This is my battle to fight. My responsibility. My brother would be devastated if you threw your life away for revenge, Izuku interrupted, never taking his eyes off Stain. That's not what heroes do, Ida. We save people. We don't abandon others to pursue personal vendettas. A flicker of uncertainty crossed Ida's features, the righteous fury that had driven him to Hosu wavering in the face of Izuku's words. Stain observed this exchange with unsettling intensity. The child speaks truth. Your actions are driven by selfish hatred, not heroic duty. You're exactly the kind of pretender I've sworn to purge from this corrupt society. And you're a murderer justifying your actions with twisted ideology. Izuku countered, shifting his stance to better protect both Ida and Native. True heroism isn't about purging what you consider fake. It's about saving everyone you can, regardless of whether you deem them worthy. Something dangerous flashed in Stain's eyes, a zealot's rage at having his core beliefs challenged. He drew a second blade, his posture shifting to something more lethal than before. Perhaps I misjudged you, he growled. If you defend false heroes so vehemently, maybe you're just another symptom of this diseased system. Izuku knew the next exchange would be decisive. Stain was done testing, he would attack with killing intent. One slip, one moment of hesitation, and Izuku could easily join his friends in paralyzed vulnerability. Touching his chest briefly, he established his second rule, New Order: my neural pathways will remain active regardless of external influence. This would counter Stain's paralysis quirk even if the villain managed to taste his blood, a crucial insurance policy given the danger of the situation. I'm going to show you what a real hero looks like, Izuku declared, channeling 30% of one for all throughout his body, pushing beyond his usual limit but necessary against an opponent of Stain's caliber. The hero killer charged with murderous speed, blades gleaming in the alley's dim light. Izuku met the assault head-on, weaving between slashes with enhanced precision while looking for openings in Stain's defense. The clash was visceral and desperate, Stain's years of experience and natural talent against Izuku's raw power and tactical mind. Each exchange left cuts in Izuku's costume, while his counters gradually wore down the villain's stamina. You're strong, boy, Stain acknowledged during a momentary separation, breathing heavily. But you lack the resolve to do what's necessary. That hesitation will be your downfall. He was right about one thing. Izuku was holding back, focusing on incapacitation rather than serious injury. Against a killer of Stain's caliber, this self-imposed limitation created significant disadvantage. I don't need to critically injure you to win, Izuku replied, adjusting his approach. I just need to keep you occupied until help arrives. A flash of movement at the alley's entrance caught his attention. A familiar red and white figure approaching cautiously. Midoriya? Todoroki called, taking in the scene with widening eyes. Ida? What's happening here? Todoroki. Izuku never took his eyes off Stain. Perfect timing. Ida and Native are paralyzed. The hero killer's quirk activates through blood consumption. Stain's expression darkened at the arrival of reinforcements. Another child playing at heroism. Endeavor's son, no less, born of privilege and nepotism. I'm not here representing my father, Todoroki replied coolly, ice forming along his right side as he assessed the situation. I'm here because my friends need help. With Todoroki's arrival, the dynamic shifted dramatically. Stain now faced two opponents with complementary abilities. Izuku's speed and power balanced by Todoroki's ranged elemental attacks. The narrow alley, previously advantageous for the hero killer's close-quarters fighting style, became constricting as Todoroki's ice narrowed the available space. Todoroki, keep him contained but be careful not to get cut. Izuku called, coordinating their approach. Even a small amount of blood could immobilize you. Working in tandem, they gradually pushed Stain into a defensive position. Todoroki created ice barriers to limit the villain's movement options, while Izuku engaged in carefully timed rushes to prevent Stain from settling into any rhythm. As the battle progressed, Izuku noticed Ida struggling against his paralysis. Emotional turmoil evident in his expression as he watched his classmates risk their lives on his behalf. Ida, Izuku called between exchanges. A real hero acknowledges his mistakes and learns from them. What matters now isn't your past decisions, but what you choose to do going forward. Something broke in Ida's expression, the cold vengeance that had driven him to Hosu crumbling beneath the weight of realization. Tears streamed down his face as the true cost of his actions became clear. I'm sorry, he whispered, voice choked with emotion. I was so wrong, so blind. As if responding to his emotional breakthrough, movement gradually returned to Ida's extremities. Stain's paralysis beginning to wear off as its duration limit approached. The hero killer noticed this development as well, his attacks growing more desperate as the advantage shifted further away from him. With a snarl of frustration, he threw a cluster of knives toward the vulnerable native, forcing Todoroki to divert his attention to defense. In that momentary opening, Stain launched himself toward Ida with lethal intent, a final attempt to claim at least one victim before being overwhelmed. "No!" Izuku shouted, pushing One for All to 35% beyond his safe limit without protective rules. The surge of power launched him into Stain's path with explosive speed, intercepting the attack meant for Ida. Pain lanced through his shoulder as one of Stain's blades found its mark, but Izuku used the close proximity to grab the villain's arm in an unbreakable grip. "It's over," he declared, channeling One for All through his free arm as he touched Stain's chest. "New order. Your muscles will relax completely for the next 5 minutes." The effect was immediate, all tension vanishing from Stain's body as his voluntary muscle control ceased. He collapsed like a puppet with cut strings, weapons clattering to the ground as his limbs refused to respond to his commands. "What have you done to me?" he growled, eyes wild with fury as he found himself completely immobilized. "I imposed a rule that your muscles would relax," Izuku explained, wincing as he assessed the wound in his shoulder. "You can't move until it wears off." As if on cue, Ida finally broke free of the paralysis, struggling to his feet despite his injuries. His expression was transformed, the cold rage replaced by profound remorse and clarity. "Midoriya, Todoroki," he said, bowing as deeply as his wounded shoulder would allow. "I cannot adequately express my shame or my gratitude. You risked your lives to save me from my own foolishness." "Save the formal apologies for later," Todoroki replied, creating ice restraints around the immobilized Stain as additional security. "We need to get medical attention for you and Native." Izuku nodded in agreement, using his costume's first aid supplies to address the most pressing injuries. As he worked, the sound of jet propulsion announced Gran Torino's arrival at the alley entrance. "Found you, problem child," the elderly hero called, landing beside them with a concerned frown. "I should have known you'd find the most dangerous situation possible the moment I took my eyes off you." He surveyed the scene with expert assessment, the restrained hero killer, the injured heroes, the evidence of intense combat throughout the narrow space. "The Nomu situation is under control," he reported, helping secure Stain for transport. "Pro-heroes have contained or defeated all 3 artificial humans. We need to get this one to police custody immediately. He's too dangerous to leave unattended for long." As they emerged from the alley with their captive, a group of pro-heroes approached rapidly, led by Manuel, Ida's internship supervisor. Their expressions shifted from concern to astonishment as they recognized the subdued villain. "Is that the hero killer?" Manuel asked, incredulous. "You students managed to capture him?" Before any of them could respond, a disturbance overhead drew everyone's attention. A winged Nomu, apparently escaped from the main battle, swooping down toward the gathered heroes with alarming speed. "Look out!" Izuku called, pushing 20% of One for All into his legs as he prepared to intercept. There was no need. With movement so fast it defied visual tracking, Stain somehow broke free of his restraints and launched himself at the flying creature. Despite his injuries and previous immobilization, he moved with murderous efficiency, a hidden blade finding the Nomu's exposed brain with surgical precision. All the fakes must be purged," Stain rasped, standing over the fallen creature with blood dripping from his blade. "Only All Might is worthy, only he embodies true heroism." The gathered heroes and students stood frozen in shock at the display. Stain turned toward them, his bloodshot eyes fixed on Izuku with disturbing intensity. "You, boy, you have the potential for true heroism," he declared, blood dripping from beneath his mask. "Don't let this corrupt society taint your spirit." Before anyone could react, Stain collapsed, his earlier injuries and the strain of his final attack finally overwhelming even his formidable endurance. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the distant sounds of emergency vehicles and the settling city. In that moment of shared witness, something profound had shifted, not just in the immediate situation, but in the very landscape of hero society itself. As medical teams arrived to treat the injured and police secured the unconscious Stain, Izuku found himself standing between his classmates, a peculiar weight settling on his shoulders. The hero killer's words echoed uncomfortably in his mind, raising questions he had no immediate answers for. What made a true hero? Was the current system as corrupt as Stain believed? And perhaps most troublingly, why had the villain singled him out among all others present? These questions would have to wait. For now, there were wounds to treat, reports to file, and a city to help rebuild. The philosophical implications of Stain's ideology could be examined once the immediate crisis had passed. As dawn broke over Hosu City, Izuku Midoriya understood that something fundamental had changed, both in himself and in the world around him. The path to becoming the greatest hero had just become considerably more complex. Chapter 13. Crucible. The aftermath of the Hosu incident unfolded like ripples in a pond, with consequences expanding outward in ever-widening circles. For Izuku, Todoroki, and Ida, the immediate effects were straightforward medical treatment for their injuries, detailed debriefings with police, and stern lectures from their respective internship supervisors about protocol and reckless endangerment. "I should revoke your provisional license," Gran Torino grumbled as they returned to his apartment the following day. Disobeying direct orders, engaging a Class A villain without backup, putting yourself in mortal danger. Despite his harsh words, there was a note of gruff pride beneath the elderly hero's criticism. He had reviewed the combat footage captured by security cameras in the alley, and while he wouldn't admit it openly, Izuku's performance had impressed him. "You're lucky the police are classifying this as defensive action in a crisis situation," he continued, preparing tea with practiced movements. "Otherwise, all three of you could have faced serious consequences for unauthorized quirk usage." Izuku nodded soberly, the bandages on his shoulder a constant reminder of how close their encounter with Stain had come to tragedy. "I understand the protocols, sir, but I couldn't leave Ida to die." Gran Torino's expression softened marginally. "No, you couldn't. And that instinct to rush toward danger when others are in peril is the foundation of true heroism. But it must be tempered with judgment and strategy, or you'll end up dead before you can save anyone." The wider repercussions of the Hosu incident became apparent that evening as news broadcasts across Japan focused almost exclusively on the capture of the hero killer. Despite efforts by police to control the narrative, leaked footage of the alleyway confrontation had spread across social media, showing 3 UA students successfully subduing a villain that had eluded pro-heroes for months. "The public reaction is complicated," Gran Torino observed, watching the coverage with narrowed eyes. Pride in UA's students, certainly, but also uncomfortable questions about why children succeeded where professionals failed. More concerning was how the incident had elevated Stain from a brutal serial killer to something approaching an ideological figure. His final speech about fake heroes and societal corruption was being dissected by commentators, with some fringe elements even expressing sympathy for his underlying message, if not his methods. "This is exactly what we didn't need," Gran Torino muttered. "Villains with manifestos inspire copycats. Mark my words, Stain's ideology will attract those who feel disenfranchised by the current hero system." His prediction proved grimly accurate. In the days following the hero killer's capture, a notable uptick in villain activity was reported nationwide, many explicitly referencing Stain's philosophy as inspiration. The League of Villains, previously seen as disorganized extremists, began to attract new members drawn by their perceived connection to Stain's crusade. On the final day of his internship, Izuku sat with Gran Torino for a concluding assessment of his progress and future development. "You've shown impressive growth in just 1 week," the elderly hero acknowledged, reviewing his notes. "Your control over One for All has improved substantially, and your creative applications of New Order continue to expand." He fixed Izuku with a penetrating gaze. "But your greatest challenge isn't mastering your quirks. It's understanding the responsibility they represent. The combination of abilities you possess. It's unprecedented in its potential for both constructive and destructive applications." Izuku nodded thoughtfully. All Might said something similar after the sports festival. "Tashinori has always understood the weight of power," Gran Torino replied. "Perhaps better than anyone. But your situation is unique even compared to his. One for All alone made him the symbol of peace, a beacon that shaped an entire generation of heroes. Combined with New Order's versatility, your potential influence could be even more profound." He leaned forward, his usually gruff demeanor giving way to genuine concern. "The world is changing, young Midoriya. Stain's capture has accelerated ideological fractures that were already forming in hero society. In times of social transformation, those with exceptional power often become focal points, symbols that others rally behind or against." The implications settled heavily on Izuku's shoulders. "You're saying I need to be careful about how I present myself and my abilities." "I'm saying you need to be intentional," Gran Torino corrected. "Every public action you take, every victory or defeat will contribute to the narrative that forms around you. That narrative will eventually extend beyond your personal identity to influence broader perceptions of heroism itself." As they parted ways at the train station, the elderly hero offered one final piece of advice. "Remember what truly matters, Midoriya. Not power, not acclaim, not even ideology. A hero exists to save people, everything else is secondary. Returning to UA after the internships, Izuku found the atmosphere subtly altered. Students from other courses regarded Class 1A with a mixture of admiration and wariness, their repeated involvement in high-profile villain incidents marking them as either extraordinarily fortunate or magnets for trouble. Man, it feels weird being back after everything that happened, Kirishima remarked as they prepared for homeroom. Like we've all aged a couple years in just 1 week. Around the classroom, evidence of their experiences was visible in various forms. Ida's arm in a sling from his encounter with Stain, Bakugo's uncharacteristically subdued demeanor following his internship with Best Jeanist, Uraraka's newfound focus on combat training after working with Gunhead. All right, settle down, Aizawa called as he entered, his perpetually tired expression unchanged despite the eventful week. I hope your internships provided valuable insight into professional hero work. Some of you. His gaze lingered briefly on Izuku, Todoroki, and Ida. Experienced more than was strictly necessary, but that's becoming a pattern with this class. He activated the classroom screen, displaying a training schedule. We're approaching the end of first term, which means final exams are coming. These will include both written and practical components, testing everything you've learned since entering UA. Groans emanated from several students, particularly those who struggled academically. For those concerned about the practical exam, Aizawa continued, ignoring the complaints, this year's format has been modified in response to recent events. Previously, you would have faced robots similar to the entrance exam. Given the real-world villain encounters many of you have experienced, that approach no longer seems adequate. A ripple of tension spread through the classroom as students processed the implications. Instead, you'll be facing the teaching staff directly, Aizawa announced, triggering exclamations of shock. Paired in teams of 2, each group will be matched against a pro hero from UA's faculty. Your objective will be either to escape through a designated exit or to successfully restrain your opponent using capture tape. We have to fight the teachers? Kaminari exclaimed, panic evident in his voice. That's impossible. It's meant to be challenging, Aizawa replied coolly. Real villain encounters rarely present favorable odds. This will test not just your combat capabilities, but your judgment, teamwork, and tactical thinking. As students processed this information with varying degrees of anxiety, Izuku's mind was already analyzing possibilities. Fighting pro heroes would indeed be daunting, but it also presented a unique opportunity to test their growth against established benchmarks. The pairings and matchups will be announced the day of the exam, Aizawa concluded. I suggest you use the remaining time to review your weaknesses and consider potential countermeasures against different quirk types. In the days that followed, study groups formed across Class 1A as students prepared for both the written and practical components of their finals. Izuku divided his time between academic review, quirk refinement, and strategic analysis of the teaching staff's known abilities. Midoriya, your notes on the teachers are incredible, Uraraka remarked during one study session, flipping through his hero analysis notebook with wide eyes. You've documented weaknesses I never would have noticed. It's just observation and deduction, Izuku replied modestly, though he appreciated the compliment. Anyone could do it with enough attention to detail. No, they really couldn't, Todoroki interjected, his usual stoicism giving way to genuine respect. Your analytical ability is a quirk in itself. As the exam date approached, Izuku found himself sought out by classmates seeking strategic advice for potential matchups. Even Bakugo, though he would never directly ask for help, lingered within earshot during discussions of counter-strategies against specific teachers. The morning of the practical exam arrived with palpable tension throughout Class 1A. Students gathered at Training Ground Gamma in their hero costumes, awaiting the announcement of pairs and opponents. Listen up, Aizawa called, standing alongside the assembled teaching staff. The following teams will face these opponents in the order listed. The pairings appeared on a large screen. Todoroki and Yaoyorozu versus Aizawa. Midoriya and Bakugo versus All Might. Azui and Tokoyami versus Ectoplasm. Ida and Ojiro versus Power Loader. Uraraka and Aoyama versus 13. Kaminari and Ishido versus Principal Nizu. Kirishima and Sato versus Cementos. Shoji and Hagakure versus Snipe. Mineta and Siro versus Midnight. Koda and Jiro versus Present Mike. A stunned silence fell over the students as they processed the matchups. Each pairing seemed deliberately designed to test specific weaknesses or interpersonal dynamics. Midoriya and Bakugo versus All Might, Todoroki murmured, voicing what many were thinking. That's either the worst possible matchup or Or they're giving the two strongest students the most challenging opponent, Yaoyorozu finished, her analytical mind quickly grasping the logic. Izuku's attention was fixed on All Might, who stood among the teachers in his hero form, his ever-present smile containing a hint of challenge as their eyes met across the distance. Beside him, Bakugo had gone unnaturally still, his usual explosive demeanor replaced by intense focus. "So they're pitting us against the number one," he said quietly. "Perfect. Each team will have 30 minutes to either escape through the exit or capture your opponent," Aizawa explained. "You'll be wearing weighted wristbands to simulate the physical disadvantage you'd face against most villains. Teachers will also be wearing weights, but significantly lighter ones." He gestured to a monitoring area where non-participating students could observe each match. Those awaiting their turn will watch the preceding battles. Use this opportunity to learn from both successes and failures. As the first match prepared to begin, Todoroki and Yaoyorozu versus Aizawa himself, Izuku found a moment to approach Bakugo privately. "We should discuss strategy," he began cautiously, knowing his childhood friend's aversion to anything resembling assistance. All Might is going to be the most challenging opponent by far. To his surprise, Bakugo didn't immediately reject the overture. Instead, he fixed Izuku with an intense stare. "You know something about him that I don't," he stated flatly. "You've trained with him outside of class. Don't bother denying it. I've seen how he watches you, how you understand his movements before anyone else." Izuku hesitated, caught between maintaining one for all secret and the practical need for effective teamwork. "I've studied him extensively," he acknowledged carefully. "More than any other hero." Obviously, Bakugo snorted. "The question is whether you're going to share what you know or keep playing whatever game you two have going." The directness of the challenge demanded an equally direct response. "All Might's greatest strength isn't his power, it's his experience," Izuku stated, choosing his words with care. "He has counters prepared for virtually any strategy we might employ. Our only advantage is that he'll be holding back to make this a learning experience rather than a complete shutdown. So we need to do something he won't expect," Bakugo concluded, uncharacteristic strategic calm in his assessment. "Something that goes against our established patterns." Izuku nodded, relieved that Bakugo was engaging constructively. "Exactly. He'll expect us to struggle with teamwork, you to charge in aggressively while I try to coordinate from behind. If we reverse those expectations, I create the diversion while you go for a decisive strike," Bakugo finished, a predatory grin spreading across his face. "He'll never see it coming." As they continued refining their approach, the first match unfolded on the monitors, Todoroki and Yaoyorozu employing brilliant teamwork against Aizawa's erasure capabilities. The combination of Yaoyorozu's tactical genius and Todoroki's raw power ultimately secured their victory through escape rather than capture. The subsequent matches showcased the growth each student had achieved since entering UA Azui, and Tokoyami used environmental advantages to overcome ectoplasm's numerical superiority. Ida and Ojiro demonstrated exceptional coordination against power loader's terrain manipulation. Uraraka revealed new combat applications of her zero-gravity against 13's black hole. When Principal Nisu utterly demolished Kaminari and Ishido through superior intelligence rather than quirk advantage, the message became clear. These exams were designed to highlight specific lessons about professional hero work that transcended raw power or flashy abilities. Finally, it was time for Izuku and Bakugo to face All Might. "It feels strange, doesn't it?" All Might remarked as they stood at opposite ends of the industrial cityscape that would serve as their battleground. "The two of you working together against me. Life has a way of creating unexpected scenarios." Izuku felt the familiar weight of one for all beneath his skin, a power passed from the very man he now faced as an opponent. The irony wasn't lost on him. "Remember," All Might continued, his smile never wavering, "this isn't just about winning or losing. It's about learning your limitations and how to overcome them. Now, shall we begin?" The starting signal blared, and immediately Bakugo launched into action, but not with his usual headlong charge. Instead, he created a series of calculated explosions that generated a smoke screen across the main avenue, obscuring visibility while minimizing structural damage. "Smart opening," All Might commented, scanning the smoke for movement. "But I can still hear you." He launched himself forward with devastating speed, clearing the smoke in an instant, only to find the space empty of opponents. A flash of motion above caught his attention just as Bakugo descended from a building ledge, gauntlets primed. Howitzer impact. The massive explosion enveloped All Might in fire and concussive force, powerful enough to shatter windows throughout the training ground. As the smoke cleared, All Might stood relatively unharmed but visibly impressed by the attack's potency. Excellent power, young Bakugo. But where is? His question was answered as Izuku emerged from an entirely different direction, having circled around during the distraction. With full cowling at 25%, he closed distance with unprecedented speed. New order already activated. New order. The air around All Might will become dense as concrete. The atmosphere solidified around the symbol of peace, creating momentary resistance that slowed even his immense strength. In that critical opening, Izuku delivered a devastating blow enhanced by One for All, driving All Might backward despite the hero's superior mass and power. Impressive coordination. All Might called out, breaking free of the dense air with a powerful flex. But you'll need more than clever tactics to overcome this difference in experience. What followed was a masterclass in professional combat. All Might moved with precision that belied his massive frame, each action economical and purposeful. Even holding back considerably, his attacks carried force that threatened to overwhelm both students if landed directly. Bakugo and Izuku maintained their reversed roles, the explosive student providing tactical support and distraction while Izuku executed primary attacks. The strategy clearly caught All Might off guard, forcing him to adapt to an approach he hadn't anticipated from either student. "He's still not taking us seriously," Bakugo growled after 10 minutes of inconclusive exchanges. "We need to force him to acknowledge us as genuine threats." Izuku nodded in agreement, wiping blood from a small cut on his cheek. "Time for phase 2. Then, about damn time," Bakugo replied with a feral grin. They separated again, but this time with a coordinated purpose that had been lacking in their previous encounters with All Might. Bakugo positioned himself near a major intersection, creating increasingly aggressive explosions that demanded attention. "Come on, number 1, he roared, his challenge echoing through the concrete canyons. "Stop holding back and fight me properly." All Might appeared with blinding speed, his expression still holding that unshakable smile despite the intensity of combat. "If you insist, young Bakugo." The clash between them was spectacular, Bakugo's combat instincts allowing him to anticipate and counter moves that would have overwhelmed most pro heroes. But it was clear that All Might was still restraining himself significantly, treating the exchange as a teaching moment rather than a genuine confrontation. Meanwhile, Izuku had reached their actual objective. Not the exit point that All Might was positioned to guard, but a specific building that Bakugo's earlier explosions had strategically weakened. Channeling 35% of One for All into his legs, Izuku launched himself at the structure's critical support column. Manchester smash. The impact was devastating, causing the already compromised building to shudder ominously. All Might's head snapped toward the sound, his experienced eyes immediately recognizing the strategic implication. "Clever," he muttered, disengaging from Bakugo to address this new threat. Using the environment itself as a weapon, the building began to collapse in a controlled demolition, its weight and trajectory carefully calculated to force All Might into a specific defensive position. As debris rained down, threatening both the hero and the surrounding civilian structures, All Might had no choice but to brace himself and halt the collapse with his immense strength. "Now!" Bakugo shouted, launching himself toward All Might's position with explosive propulsion. Izuku converged from the opposite direction, One for All crackling at 40% throughout his body. Pushing beyond his usual limits, but necessary against an opponent of All Might's caliber. Caught supporting the collapsing structure, All Might couldn't fully defend against their simultaneous assault. Bakugo's explosions disrupted his footing while Izuku delivered a precisely targeted strike to his weighted wristband. New order. These weights will become 100 times heavier for the next minute. The effect was immediate and dramatic. All Might's immense strength, even partially restrained for the exercise, was suddenly insufficient to support both the collapsing building and his own equipment. He sank to one knee, muscles straining against the exponentially increased burden. "Extraordinary teamwork," he acknowledged, genuine pride evident beneath the strain. "Using my hero instincts against me." With All Might momentarily immobilized, Izuku and Bakugo seized their opportunity. Moving with practiced coordination that belied their usual antagonism, they deployed the capture tape in tandem, Bakugo securing the hero's legs while Izuku managed his upper body. "Capture complete," Aizawa's voice announced through the monitoring system. Midoriya and Bakugo passed the practical exam. As the weights returned to normal and All Might carefully completed the building's controlled demolition, he regarded his students with unrestrained approval. "That was exceptional strategy," he commended, brushing debris from his costume. "Forcing me to choose between self-defense and civilian protection, then capitalizing on that heroic instinct." creative, efficient, and surprisingly well-coordinated. Bakugo accepted the praise with uncharacteristic composure, his usual hostility tempered by the satisfaction of genuine achievement. We knew we couldn't match you directly, so we had to change the parameters of the fight. The mark of true tactical thinking, All Might agreed. Though I hope you realize that in a real confrontation, I wouldn't have been quite so accommodating. We know, Izuku acknowledged, deactivating full cowling as the adrenaline of combat began to fade. But the purpose was to demonstrate our ability to work together and overcome a superior opponent through strategy rather than raw power. All Might's smile widened slightly. And that, young Midoriya, is precisely why you both passed with flying colors. Sometimes the most important skill a hero can develop isn't how to win a fight, but how to recognize when fighting isn't the optimal solution. As they walked back toward the monitoring area to observe the remaining matches, Bakugo fell into step beside Izuku, not with his usual aggressive distance, but with something approaching reluctant respect. That way Trick was decent, he admitted grudgingly. And your analysis of his protective instincts was accurate. Coming from Bakugo, this qualified as effusive praise. Izuku accepted it with a simple nod, understanding that their relationship had shifted into something new. Not friendship exactly, but perhaps a form of professional acknowledgement that transcended their complicated history. We make a surprisingly effective team, Izuku observed cautiously. Bakugo snorted, some of his usual fire returning. Don't get used to it, Deku. Next time, we'll be opponents again, and I won't be holding back. I wouldn't have it any other way, Izuku replied with a small smile, recognizing the threat for what it actually was. Bakugo's peculiar form of respect. As the final matches concluded and Class 1 gathered to review their collective performance, Izuku found himself reflecting on Gran Torino's parting words about responsibility and intention. Today's exam had demonstrated not just his growing mastery of his quirks, but also his developing understanding of heroism beyond mere combat capability. A hero exists to save people, everything else is secondary. This core principle had guided his strategy against All Might, prioritizing minimal collateral damage and controlled application of force over spectacular displays of power. It was a philosophy he intended to carry forward, regardless of how his abilities continued to evolve. The first term at UA was drawing to a close with summer training camp on the horizon. Izuku Midoriya, once the quirkless child dreaming of heroism from the sidelines, had established himself as one of the most promising students in UA's storied history. But more important than the accolades or recognition was the path he was forging, an approach to heroism built on analytical thinking, strategic application of power, and unwavering commitment to saving others. It was this combination, rather than the raw potential of his dual quirks, that would ultimately define his legacy in the hero world to come.
From the stadium spotlight to the shadows of back alley vengeance, Izuku Midoriya didn't just survive, he dominated. New Order and One for All now move as one, and his enemies are starting to understand what that really means. But the path of a true hero only gets steeper from here. So stay ready, Chrono Crew legends, because the next chapter is going to change everything. This was What If Deku Had New Order, Part 2.